Well, for last week, I've been gone for 10 days, actually 12 days. Returned yesterday from a pretty fast tour of Italy, United Kingdom. I missed you, Jenny, but we were so busy there wasn't any time. And then also we met up with Bernardo Kastrup in the Netherlands, and oh my God, what a great film trip we had. It was a total success, 100%. And I'm happy to be back, but I had an awesome time. I could do that more often at a slower pace would be really great. And I have to say, every one of our interviews, there were 5 in this filming tour. Last month we had 5 in the US. We had 5 in the last 10 days in this filming tour. I really think that we're going to have several episodes. I'm sure we will, but they're all superstars. All of them are superstar interviews, and I know that you guys are going to love them, and the audience is going to be really informed about what awakening is. And Dan, I couldn't see you come in the room, so I thought I brought you in. I brought Conti in, and then I thought, well, maybe that's you, but now I see that you are you. And thank you for being our co-host today. And it's my joy to invite Daniel or Dan Bisgaard as our co-host, and looking forward to sharing this time with you as well. Thank you for being here, Dan.
Thank you, Bill. So I guess shall I get started then?
Yeah, let's get started.
All right, we've got 10 to do today, and we'll try and get through them with some dispatch. The main theme of them is always Shri Atmananda goes from the particular back to the general, and then he goes back deeper and deeper, closer to the true nature. That's his overwhelming, overriding concern, is to get you back to inside and back to your real self.
Yeah, he does. And the first title of this 321, why should I live or why should I die? He kind of makes it a little bit of a puzzle, doesn't he?
He certainly does. At first time I looked at it, I thought, well, this seems to be a quote from the Myth of the Sisyphus by Albert Camus. And that was published in 1942 during the height of foreign occupation of France. And Camus was saying, what's the purpose of living? And when life doesn't make any sense, we try our best, and look what happens. The universe turns on us. So he took up the ancient Greek myth of excuse me. Let me calm down a little bit. Sisyphus was a king of Corinth, and he was a trickster, as a real figure in mythology. And as a trickster, he tricked the gods, and he actually tempted Death, the god of death, into donning a pair of bracelets like handcuffs, and chained him to a rock, which, of course, Death did not like. And all of a sudden, people stopped dying. In fact, creatures stopped dying all over the world. Well, this was great for mankind and all the creatures, but it wasn't great for the gods. They missed their sacrifices. It wasn't good for the priests that did funerary rites. Business went off a cliff, and not to speak of grave-diggers, right? So Zeus took revenge, and he put Sisyphus down in Hades, and said, there's this giant steep sloping hill you must climb, and you have to carry up a giant boulder. which would take him all day long and great effort. And so he had to do that. And when he got to the top, the boulder rolled down again. And he had to go back and start from the beginning. So this is and Albert Camus and other scholars have said this is a metaphor for mankind. We keep trying to do the same thing over and over again, and it doesn't make sense. What if this is the nature of life? There has to be something more to this than that. Now, this has been interpreted in various ways. It's one thing. A lot of people say, no matter how clever and cunning you are, we are not immune to the whims of the gods or the inevitability of death. Camus, in the midst of World War II, said, well, this is really a matter of the human spirit. The human spirit is so good that there's dignity in doing what doesn't seem to make sense, even when we have to. And that includes dying. So he ended up with it. He said, actually, Sisyphus is probably smiling as he rolls the rock up the hill. Camus won the Nobel Prize 6 years later. And for literature, he was the second youngest in history. I know you want to know who was the first, and the first was Kipling back in 1907. Right. So.
Wow. Well, the metaphors are very accurate and appropriate because people do, throughout history and today, also at all ages, they come to a point where they either say, is this all there is? And that curiosity leads them to an interest in awakening, or they become frustrated and they give up and they sometimes take their own lives. Young people do that. It's a shame because if they just hang on, they'll see that there is another possibility. There is another way, and the other way is to have an awakening experience. Yeah. Why should I live or why should I die? And in this discourse, he says in the second paragraph, mind, and I thought this was interesting, Dan. He says that mind in its functions moves either forwards to something-ness or backwards to apparent nothingness. When you are thinking of the ultimate reality, you can discover that your mind is functioning backwards to the state where all thoughts vanish. It is a retreat into the innermost core of your own being consciousness.
There he goes. That's his point.
Yeah.
He wants to lead you away from that, the particular examples that you're looking at in a dualistic sense, and the world out there that sometimes doesn't make any sense at all, back to your true nature, which is, of course, consciousness, being, and peace. Right.
And how many people do you know, Dan, or anyone else here, that goes, people come to a point in their life when they say, what are we here for? What's my purpose? And without purpose, people lose interest and they start to, they become deflated or, kind of lazy or disinterested or whatever. Everyone needs to either have a purpose of being or a purpose in movement.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. That's the actual original meaning of the multi-use term dharma. Dharma is the purpose of life, what you're called upon to do. It means all sorts of things in Indian philosophy, but in this sense, it's that. So everyone has a dharma.
Yeah.
Atmananda would have of the Gita and how the hero of the section on where it's called the second chapter of the Yoga of Knowledge, verses 11 through 72, I think. That's the most important section of the Gita. If you're going to read something of the Gita, read that. That's what all the Indians read first.
Which section is that?
chapter 2. I think there are 18 chapters, verses 11 through 72.
Okay, cool.
What is the whole? See, Arjuna he's okay. What focuses your mind more than combat, right? I mean, frontline combat where you can actually see the enemy looking at you. Well, this is what Arjuna is faced with. It's even worse in his case because he recognizes the people on the other side as his cousins, kinsmen, and his most beloved teacher. And he doesn't want to kill those people. So the weapon drops from his hand. What's he going to do? So he asks his charioteer, who is coincidentally named Krishna, who decided he wouldn't take place in the war, but he would be the charioteer of Arjuna, and the man whose weapon dropped. And Krishna says, "Look, you don't understand. Let me tell you about the yoga of knowledge. And part of this is that, yes, body minds are born and die, but your spirit does not. It's a lot like we wear clothing until they wear out, and then we take off old clothing and put on new clothing. So in a modern sense, we believe in Advaita Vedanta that our true nature, which is, of course, being, consciousness, and peace, or bliss, is neither born nor dies. The body mind does that. So he says, all this horror of the world and the wars, as you see, it doesn't make any sense, is just there because it's tempting you to think, to deceive you of your true nature. So your true nature is beyond all that, and it's your dharma to take place, do your job as you need to do in your life. So it's usually, they say in Indian thought, it's varnashrama dharma. And the varnas are the caste or the class of societal class in which you're born. And it's also the stage of life. And the ashramas are the stages of life. So as you're young, you're a student, your dharma is to study. After that, your dharma, if you're a usual Hindu priest, you get married and have kids. Third, after that, after the kids grow up and are able to take care of themselves, you enter the forest. You and your wife enter the forest, and you pray. You pray and you do austerities to try and get closer to your true nature, discovering it. And the last one is you give up everything, even your name. That's why people who take vows, like being a Swami or Swamini, give up their family name. So that's then, but it's our dharma to do what we're supposed to do. Like raise your.
Is that the Hindu tradition? What
is the bedrock of the Hindu tradition, social tradition?
Right, yeah, and that's still practiced today in a huge part of India, I would imagine.
Well, you see all these old folks going to places of pilgrimage. I did, and they were all dressed in orange, and the men would be playing cards and laughing and joking. So they're living their life in retirement that way.
Yeah, right. Yeah, cool. I love one of the things I love about a tradition that's held over thousands of years is the devotion that is obvious. And that's what I found in India last year when I went, is the absolute devotion from the bottom. I didn't go to the very bottom of India, but near Tiruvannamalai all the way up to the Himalayas, and the feeling that you get with all of the devotion is that this is a country of devotion. This is a country, and even though the traditions are mostly progressive and maybe not awake, there's a huge population in India that is awake and is living the experience of uh, of of awakened being.
Well, yes, you're right. Ever since medieval times in India, the whole stress of popular life, religious life, has been bhakti or devotionalism.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's very inspiring to just be part of the fabric of that devotional country. So I love it, and thank you for bringing us into those different traditions with your expertise too, Dan. Appreciate it. And for those of you that are regular here, this is a kind of a bonus round with Dan Bisgaard. He's a professor, retired, a scholar, and so he's going to take us deeper into the essence of the teaching than we normally go. And I would just ask you to consider it a gift.
Oh, how nice of you! How kind of you! I'll do my best to be faithful to the material we have at hand.
Okay, let's look at number 2.
Yeah, number 2 is happiness.
Peace.
Happiness exists only in relation to previous suffering. It means, in contrast, that's a lower level of happiness, but yes. If you were suffering before and then you have happiness, but have you ever heard of hedonic adaptation? Hedonic adaptation?
No.
Hedonic means it has to do with pleasure, right? Hedonism is the life of pursuing pleasure. So hedonic adaptation is, if you are not doing so well and you start doing better, like you win the lottery, you're very happy for a while, but it's always a limited time and space. It doesn't last. That's the adaptation. Strangely enough, or actually maybe it's more of a blessing, if you fall on harder times, you can actually adapt to that. And some of the happiest people in the world, you can see, one guy I saw once in Bombay, Mumbai as it's called these days, he's had a little stall and his family lived there, and it was hardly good. It was small, but he was absolutely, and he and his family were bright and sweet, kind, happy with their lives. That's another example of hedonic adaptation. It's just so much a matter of things. It's a matter of inside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Dan, where you gave just a very subtle reference to this. Happiness, when Atmananda's answer is happiness exists only in relation to previous sufferings, and you mentioned in the lower form of happiness. I'm happy that I'm glad you did that, because it's my understanding that happiness is our true nature. That would be the higher form of happiness.
Absolutely, you're exactly right. Yeah. That's the deep piece he talks about in the last 2 words of this 322 here.
Right. Okay. So happiness isn't only relative to a contrast. Happiness is the absolute.
Actually, yes. This happiness, or the bliss, or the peace that you have at the end of Satchidananda, the being, consciousness, and happiness, peace, bliss, whatever you want. That's a permanent baseline move. See, you're happy all the time. So that's, again, last time I was here, I told you that the note taker here, the editor of this 3-volume set, who goes by the name of Nityatripta, that's an obvious pen name. His real name was something like Balakrishna Pillai. And he took the name Nityatripta because it's actually an allusion to a spectacularly beautiful verse in the Yoga Vashishta. We see that referred to several times in these books. That is a literary work and a philosophical work that is longer than most epics. It's between 29 and 36,000 verses. Imagine that. And that's in poetry. And the poetry is gorgeous. And the non-dual philosophy therein is as deep as you're going to find anywhere. N.S. Dasgupta, who wrote the classic 5-volume History of Indian Philosophy, published by Cambridge University Press, with all the hundreds of books he had to choose from, gave a whole chapter to the Yoga Vasishta. So, so there's this wonderful verse in there where it's about a person who gets cast into the ocean of samsaric existence. And samsaric existence is just this very thing of moving from happiness to unhappiness, dualistic, Sturm and Drang in the world. And he says, cast into an ocean without anything, no shore in sight. There's no shore to this ocean. But I found the way out. I found the way out. And that way out is samarasatvam, which is to accept everything just as it is.
Yeah.
And from that, it gives you the peace beyond understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, the last two words of that verse are nitya triptaha. That person who found it is permanently happy like that. See, so I swear that's where Nitya Tripta took his name from. Is that verse? So everybody that reads the book gets to that page and they just stop there and go, "Wow!" I can't tell you how beautiful it is in Sanskrit. I can give you a sense of the first line though. Apara sansara samudra pati, having cast into this apara, shoreless apara sansara, ocean samudra, the ocean samudra, apara sansara of endless, shoreless suffering, of happiness and unhappiness alternating. But he becomes nitya triptaha at the end in the crowning part of the verse there. So that's why I think Pillai took this name. It's a great name when you understand it.
Do you think he took it, or it was given at a naming ceremony?
Could have been either way.
Yeah,
right. I don't know about ceremony, but anyway, he went by it as his nom de plume.
Yeah. How did people get named in those days?
Well, this is only a literary name. This is just
okay.
This
is that right? Okay, so he probably did give himself that name.
Yeah.
Like an actor.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, let's move on to page, the next page, 161 at the top, and he talks about what is beauty. Beauty, he says, beauty is personalized when you perceive it.
Mm-hmm.
So he's talking about you're bringing it, you're taking the formless, or you're taking the feeling, or you're taking the essence of creation, or the absolute, and you're bringing it into form, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you perceive it.
Yes.
But in itself, beauty is an expression of the absolute.
Everything according to Shri Atmananda is the absolute or watered down form thereof.
Yeah. Well, and it seems like if when you get to the essence of all the teaching, all of it is the absolute, because everything is consciousness.
That's what non-dual is all about. Yes.
Yeah.
We'll see more of that in terms of Nirvikalpa Samadhi coming up.
Oh, yeah. I was happy when I read that you were going to be on the scene today, because I always get mixed up here. And Jenny Beal, she always bails us out with these terms. And so some reinforcement from you, for me, will be welcomed.
Well, listen, let me explain that I just, my field is all of it was my job for 10 years to teach upperclassmen and graduate students the history of Buddhist thought in India and the history of Hindu thought in India. So I had a broad background, but I'm fairly new to this direct path, this version of the direct path.
Right.
So what I meant to say was what little I know here, that I'm trying to agree with Jenny as much as I possibly.
Uh,
I think that's the safest route to take.
yeah, that's funny. Well, it says in the last paragraph of this discourse that
Yeah,
when the ego tries to see beauty in the
yeah,
beautiful, both get transformed into the beyond and become beauty itself.
exactly.
And then it says, by seeing that something is beautiful, you see really that you are beauty itself.
There you go.
For example, you say the boat is beautiful, but do you see anything other than wood? No. Then where is the beauty? Certainly in the seeing, which is illumined
By
by
consciousness.
consciousness. Yes,
The
by
consciousness is
consciousness
beauty
itself.
itself. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, Ramana Maharshi said that, there are several ways to find your true nature. He recommended Atma Vichara, or self-investigation, self-inquiry, as it's put, as what he thought was the most efficient way, but not everybody, we're all different. In case it's a point that Jenny makes, that even on the direct path, that's sort of the idea, is we all have our different ways to it, according to the way our minds work and the questions that arise in our lives. So he says, consciousness is beauty itself. But yeah, Ramana Maharshi, getting back to him, he said that, okay, so Atma Vichara, self-inquiry, or meditation, second. Third can be devotionalism. And an aspect of devotionalism, he actually used the word beauty. So those of us who are inclined to appreciate beauty recognize that the beauty is actually part of the best part of our true nature.
Yeah. Yes. What's interesting to me is that our true nature is leaking out in all manner of life. Our true nature is always leaking out. And because we're not educated in the understanding to realize that we are the essence of consciousness, we are our true nature. We don't realize that that thing that's leaking out is consciousness itself.
Nicely put. Nicely put. Exactly. It's it's like they say about seemingly causeless feelings of joy and rapture. They come from seemingly nowhere, but it's leaking out. See?
Yeah, sometimes I have a kind of a weird way of expressing, but leaking out just seems to be something that you see. It leaks out of you. It leaks out of your mouth. It leaks out of your eyes. It leaks out of your activities in life and the way you say and see things. It's all the beauty of consciousness leaking out.
You could put it this way: they often do it in India, shining out, radiating.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's okay. That would be a
Sort of the whole idea of halos,
sure, right? Yeah. Everybody, all we're looking at here is 61 halos. That's it. In all its variety.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Well, let's look at the very last of this discourse, 322. It says, you say that you know and that you love another. Knowledge in the relative sphere is becoming one with another, which with one's intellect. Love is becoming one with another and one's whole being. So love is relatively deeper. Deeper knowledge is love.
Exactly.
Direct perception is silent knowing.
Exactly. So that's this 1, 2, and 3, right? Knowledge, love. With deeper knowledge is love. We go out to direct perception. It's silent because it's so deep. It's inexpressible. It's ineffable.
Yeah. So one of the things that I interviewed those 5 people in this 10 days of filming. And one of the things that it was so fun to watch Steve Taylor. Jenny, he's in your backyard. He's such a cool writer, author, and in my mind, Steve Taylor is a true modern day mystic. But in interviewing him, I asked him what the characteristics of those who awaken are. What are those characteristics? And those characteristics are someone who is a kind of a loner, someone that is kind, someone that is easily just sort of they go into nature and they see the beauty of nature, or they just have this absolute love for animals or art or all of these kinds of things. Those are all characteristics of the awakened being. And he was describing all of us in some kind of way. He was describing aspects of each one of us. And what we don't get educated in school, the things that we're not really told until we get to advanced studies like you that you were part of. We don't get educated in realizing our true nature, and unless it's something that draws us to itself. But otherwise, if you were to speak to the smile on someone's face, or the kindness of someone's heart, or the fact that people love nature and animals and to be gentle and kind and to one another, those are all the characteristics of someone who is awake.
Yeah, you want a metaphor for that? Did you ever hear of the net of Indra?
I don't think so.
Indrajala, the net of Indra. Indra was the king of the gods and Vedic gods. And they say that the universe is composed of this giant lattice work. It's this network of Indra. And that the lattice work has, each node is a multifaceted like diamond. And each one of those reflects the light of all the other diamonds and all those facets, you see, spreading out through the whole universe.
Yes.
And that's the way we're all reflecting as we, one way or another, at one time or another.
Yes. Yeah. In all of its aspects, even anger and hatred and atrocity experiences are all facets of that same expression. And the thing that brings me joy is to realize that no matter where it is on the facet of on the diamond, it's all consciousness, it's all presence, and this is just the play of those facets of the diamend.
Well, that's the beautiful part of the net metaphor, because it seems like we're all apart, but we're all still connected by all these strands.
Yeah.
So
and this is what Jesus would have been able to mean when he says, "Forgive them, Father, forgive them absolute consciousness, for they know not what they are."
Oh, nice, Bill.
Yeah. Let's move to 324, the different samadhis. Now, this is where your shining takes place.
Well, we'll see how much shining you can take.
Yeah.
This talking to our mutual friend Rick.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Rick West.
Rick West, the same.
All right. Yeah, he's on the board
next week. I talked to him on Sunday. We had a nice talk, and he was talking about, look at all those terms. I'm trying to find some of them. Let me just.
The first one is Savikalpa.
Savikalpa, yes. Hang on. I'm scrolling down to it here. Okay, Savikalpa. By the way, I'll give you a little Sanskrit lesson here. Sa means with as a prefix, and nir means without. Nir and nis means without. Okay.
Okay.
So savikalpa is with a dualistic sense, right? Seeing a sense object in a dualistic sphere. So that's got to be a pretty lower sense of samadhi. By the way, he calls this yogins, right?
Yeah.
He has a slightly different version than I got in the Yoga Sutras, but I was able to find references to them all. Nirvikalpa is beyond distinctions, all doubts, name and form. That's a little bit of a switch from the usual way of. Well, there's 13 definitions of vikalpa in my dictionary. And some of them are is doubt. See, one of the definitions is doubt and name and form, but it's a deceptive name and form. So if we want to get beyond the deceptive names and forms, right?
Yeah, but let's look at one though, as that first one. Savikalpa is visualizing a sense object.
Oh yes, okay.
And
you want to know what Ishtadevata is? Okay. Ishtadeva is the god you worship. Ishta means worshipped.
Yes.
The past participle in the dualistic sphere. In the dualistic sphere, yes.
Right.
We have later, second to the last or third to the last in this group here is where someone has a Krishna as a Ishtadevata, and Krishna sends him across a river and into a temple, and he has a temple god there, and that is Krishna in the form of a murti, which means the face of. It's a kind of statue.
Right. It's beautiful. When I went to Rishikesh, they have that Krishna. They have that Krishna statue outside several of the ashrams that are there on the Ganges.
I'm sure they did. Yeah.
Yeah. But this Nirvikalpa samadhi he says is beyond all doubts, name and form. And this Nirvikalpa samadhi is what Jenny speaks about as the awakening experience.
Now, as Jenny puts it so nicely, she says you have no sense of object, and you barely have a sense of you have actually no sense of subject either. That's a real definition. Distinctions between subject and objects disappear. See, so that the vikalpa there means distinction. So nirvikalpa is without distinctions anymore. So
there's no labels. There's no references. It's just is.
It's a state of consciousness in which you are no longer perceiving a subject or an object.
Okay.
Distinctions have disappeared.
Right.
I mean, I have this straight from I had a talk with Francis Lucille. I talked to him for about 45 minutes one-on-one a few months ago. And he asked me what Nirvikalpa Samadhi was. I went through it. I said, it's where the subject and object distinction disappears. He said, that's it. So he had me later on, he asked me to tell that to the group. So I did.
Okay. So Dan.
Yeah.
Have you had that experience?
I think we all have, in one degree of awareness of it or not, because as Jenny puts it, sometimes it's almost like you're asleep. I think, the whole thing about, we're going to come down, he doesn't talk about Sahaja Samadhi here, but Sahaja Samadhi is like the ultimate form in Vedanta. And Rick was asking in the class I took from Jenny a few months ago, he's asking, what is this about? All the teachers say the highest form of samadhi is, it's your birthright. What does that mean? Well, it's actually a literal translation. Saha, again, means with, and ja means birth. So it comes with birth. So you've always had it. It's just you didn't recognize it, but we've been using it all the time. It's behind everything.
You mean it's not, it came, you mean it came with you at birth? Yes. It was you prior to birth, actually.
Prior to birth. There you go. That's it. It's prior to birth and post-birth, post-death too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's the real, strict Advaita Vedanta definition of it. Nisargadatta used to say, well, I don't worry about death. I'm not going to die. And then that people took that's normal. He said, but I wasn't born either. That stopped him for a while.
Okay. So Dan, I'm going to ask you another question. Who are you
Yeah.
when Dan dies?
I am consciousness. And I'm also, I hope, I imagine I'm also being, because I wouldn't be consciousness if it wasn't being there too. and some sort of peace, happiness, bliss.
And how does that feel to look and have that understanding come through?
I don't have a sense of other lives, but I have a sense of like all teachers, when I'm explaining something, I sort of blend in with it. I get a sense of what's going on, and it inspires me.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for answering that question.
Well, I hope it's adequate.
It's good. All right. Let's look at number 3.
Which was
Nissan. I know I screw these names up. Nissan Kalpa.
Nissan Kalpa. I got a note on that too here.
Here, desires in embryo cease coming up in the form of sankalpa. Now,
Yeah, okay, there you go. By embryo here, it does not mean the human embryo in the sense that, this happens when you're just conceived in your mother's body. It just means in the embryonic form, before they mature, those desires get stronger and stronger and more mature. See?
mm-hmm. Okay. So desires in embryo cease coming up in the form of what's sankalpa?
Sankalpa is those desires.
Okay.
It's also in a sense of destiny, like they're destined to come.
So in relative terms, what would it be for this American human experience? What would that be referring to?
Well, since we're talking about samadhis, most of us are not conscious of having samadhis at any time. So it's not really part of our daily lives. But you see this when you get to these states. And states is also not even a correct term, but anyway, in your meditation or in whatever puts you in that state, where the mind is at peace, and it could be that desires are going to come up and distract you, as they do with all of us in our lives. The whole thing is a big thing in Hinduism and Buddhism is between clinging and aversion. So that's the whole warp and woof of life's attractions. You want this until you get it, then you don't want it anymore, and then you might have aversion to it after a while. Or you don't want it in the first place. You're adverse to it when you first see it. So that's life in dualism. That's samsaric existence.
Mm-hmm.
When you have this state of mind, when in that state, you're not bothered by those desires. See, they don't even attain embryonic form. As I say, they're not even starting up. See.
Yeah. That's good. Thank you for that. That's that's perfect. So let's look at 4. Nirva. How do you say that? Nirvritika. Nirvritika.
Nirvritika means states of mind. Oh, that was first time I was on with you. I quoted First Yoga Sutra, which is Yoga Chittavritti Nirodha, which means yoga is the subsidence of vrittis, that is, kinds of mental activity, not your higher descents, but just mental activity, which is thoughts and desires,
emotions,
emotions. Right. Thank you. Yes. Like that. Yeah.
Mhm.
So those are vrittis. And so when this vritika is without thought. See, I don't have, let me get my page back up here.
Here, even involuntary,
Yes, yeah, involuntary. Yes.
yeah, yeah, vrittis, mentations.
Yeah. Notice he uses the word stilled there. See, stilled is as I said, subsidence. Yeah.
Yeah. Coming up from the source of thoughts which have been stilled.
Yeah. That's the whole first Yoga Sutra. And then the next one is tada tashtu swavapayavastanam, which means that and then the true perceiver, your unblinded perceiver, stands in its own form, undistracted by these thoughts and emotions, desires, and all those sorts of things.
So that is describing embodied consciousness or embodied awareness.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice. Awesome.
And then,
all right, let's look at number 5. Nirvasana.
Nirvasana. That means without vasanas. What are vasanas? Vasanas are latent tendencies, are usually translated as latent tendencies. And the notes I looked at last night to define this, first of all, well, I try to see what an AI engine would do with it, how it would deal with it. I'm off Chat GPT these days. Mostly, I'm looking at Google's Bard. When they artificial intelligence engines make a mistake, they make it sound so good, but the programmers say they're hallucinating. They call it hallucinations. And Bard gave me an hallucination when so I went back and I defined it for it and I said, try that. And so then of course it plugged it in.
Oh, funny.
Anyway, so Vasana
added to the matrix.
Yeah, oh yes, they do record all this stuff, and sometimes they thank you actually.
Yeah.
Anyway, vasanas are latent tendencies, and latent tendencies in this particular context means the ones that make you see the world from a dualistic point of view.
Right, which is good to bring back with the understanding to come back and integrate into the world, your world experience.
Yeah. Good. So that's it.
It goes on.
Yeah.
It goes on. It says, these are but states of the mind in the course of the mind getting more and more sattvic. Not sure what that means.
I'll tell you what it means. Sattvic means it's part of the oldest school of Indian philosophy was called the what's it? Sankhya school, Sankhya Yoga. These always come in too. Sankhya Yoga, Vedanta, Vaisheshika, and so on. So Sankhya school is Purusha and Prakriti, a cosmic person, and Prakriti is nature. And when the person sees, when nature gets upset, it gets the world going in motion. There are 3 basic qualities of life, and it's very anthropomorphic. These are human states of consciousness and activity and so on, bodily activity. They are sattva, rajas, and tamas. Tamas is symbolized by the color black. It is very still, and it has no activity. It's sort of cohesive. So we say somebody is tamasic, they're after they've had a heavy meal, they're tamasic. See?
Okay.
And then the next one is rajasic, from rajas. Rajas is symbolized not like black, but like red this time. Red is very active. Like the color red seems active to our consciousness, right? And it has to do with going out and doing things in the world and being full of activity, maybe sometimes too full of activity, acting without prudence. But the highest state is sattvic. This is symbolized by the color white. It is obviously holier than the others. It is more enlightened than the others. And so this is the mind tending towards enlightenment. See, so that's why he says getting more and more sattvic.
Okay. It says like a dead body with the mechanical functioning of a gentle prana alone.
Yeah, that's number 5 there. There are pictures of Ramakrishna Paramahansa, the 19th century Bengali saint, being supported by other people because he's sort of in a pose where he's just out of it, just breathing is all he is. They say you could touch his eye and he wouldn't blink.
Yeah. Like the bodhisattva.
Well, that's another matter.
Okay.
Bodhisattvas are really incipient Buddhas, and they act in the world or above the world too.
Oh, you mean active like in the formless?
Doing good things. At the beginning of the Heart Sutra, Heart Sutra has the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara. Avalokiteshvara means the lordly future Buddha who Loka looks down on the world with compassion, looks down, looking down, looks down. So he's up there floating in the clouds in his near complete Buddhahood, looking down and doing blessings to the Buddhists down below. So
this is a metaphor for a higher, some kind of a transcendent.
Yeah, actually, bodhisattva means they have the being that's going to mature into full Buddhahood.
Yeah, and that could be anyone here, anyone on the planet.
But when they took it into China, they changed the gender to a female gender.
Good.
This is the goddess of compassion in Chinese Buddhism and Korean and Japanese Buddhism. It's always in Pinyin Chinese, they call it Kuan Yin.
Oh, yeah, I love that one.
How the Chinese say it. My Chinese students would go up to me and say, we call it Guanyam. Okay. Whatever you say, Guanyam. Okay. And in Japanese, it was called Kanon, from which nobody knows. Even most Japanese don't know. That's where Canon cameras come from.
That's funny.
The goddess of compassion was pictured on the earliest ads for Canon cameras way back at the founding of the company.
That is funny.
Yeah.
I can't believe how much we get to learn from having you as our co-host, Dan. Thank you for your insights and your vast understanding of so much. So let's move to 325. What is real experience?
Oh, okay.
This is a good one.
Right. Let me get it up.
He says every so-called experience ends or emerges in the ultimate I.
Yes.
Principle, in the ultimate I principle, or in other words, the I principle is the only experience. Boom, full stop right there.
Right.
Feeling is nothing but intense thought. Some say that feeling is beyond knowledge. Yes, beyond superficial knowledge. Excuse me?
He's not going to agree with that.
Yeah. Oh, Atmananda's not?
No, that's right.
Yeah. Yes, beyond superficial knowledge, it might be, but who is it that decides? Certainly not feeling, but a knowledge which knows the feeling. Therefore, there is a deeper knowledge beyond the feeling.
That's right.
So he always the truth is, pardon me?
He just always wants to take you higher and higher or deeper and deeper. No, we would put him.
Yes.
Closer to your true nature.
Yeah. He said, you are beyond head and heart, true knowledge. Your real nature is the background of both thoughts and feelings.
Yeah.
The head and the heart are only different functions of the mind. You know both. In the statement, I know, I am, it is absolute experience.
Yep.
Beyond the head and the heart that speaks. So real experience may be said to be a harmonious blending of the head and the heart.
Keep going.
Well, that's the end of that discourse. Should I carry on? What does?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, actually, I was going to say, yes.
Yeah.
Once again, I was just looking at my notes. I wrote a scribbled on the side of my printed out page here.
Okay, so you go on.
Here's my note. Once again, dualities resolve as we move deeper into the experience of the non-dual absolute, which is our true nature. That's all.
So he's really giving us a deeper, as you say, a deeper understanding that we are, you are your true nature.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And there's a blending in of the head and the heart. I think that comes from this understanding. The understanding helps the blending of these two.
Yes. Well, I think it's in terms of hidden heart, I think of love and intellect, or intellect and love in that in order. Yeah. Hidden heart.
Love and intellect, and also, go back to beauty and the characteristics of someone that is, they may not be spiritual at all, but they love nature. They love to just be. They love quiet stillness. They love. Their kindness is just it's like who they are. How many people do you know that you know they don't study anything spiritual, but they definitely act like somebody that's awake.
Yes, they're doing it in real life. Ramana Maharshi said you only have to read a few books. He was a Indian kid, 16 years old, who liked sports when he had his full experience.
Yeah.
He feared death at 16, and it gave. He said it never got any better than that. It's just working it out.
Right. Yeah. Why does one love flattery? This is a good one. This really. This is almost like it cancels out the ego in a good way.
Yeah. Yeah. My wife Conti was quoting, I think it was John Klein, who said, he had a metaphor of a ballerina doing a beautiful dance. And then before the audience was still in rapture, the clown came out on stage and they started clapping, and the clown took a deep bow. That's the ego.
Right. Yeah. So you know how it feels when someone says, "Oh man, you're awesome,"
Yeah.
or "Oh, you're so good at that." So there's a momentary sort of acceptance of the joy that came with that with that. And then there's of course the clown that takes the bow, or the ego that steps in and takes credit.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. But it does feel good when someone acknowledges your the things that you really did great. Oh man, wow, it's such a great job. Love what you did here. So that momentary like flattery,
Yeah.
it's not egoic. Isn't that interesting?
Yep.
I found that to be very interesting.
It is. You're right.
When a work written by the second paragraph says, when a work written by a sage is read by someone while the sage is still living, it opens up a direct contact with him. But after the sage is passing away, this cannot do so. If the desire is deep and earnest, contact through reading will certainly facilitate meeting in person either that sage, if he is still living, or some other. Well, what's your takeaway from that?
It's a nice thought that you can do it that way. he talks about the sages that have passed away not having the efficacy. But I have been inspired by reading people that are long dead.
Yeah.
And sometimes they put things so beautifully, but I don't know if he's talking about some sort of living transmission, which is, of course, is part of the culture if there is a living transition.
Yeah. Well, I have to say that the written transmission is as powerful as someone in person often.
Or more so.
Yeah.
It depends on the person and the transmission.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a debatable point. There's more people than just Ramana Maharshi who didn't have a guru. There's quite a number of them. In fact, there's a whole thing in Buddhism called the Pratyeka Buddha. The Pratyeka Buddhas are the Buddhas that are out there in the field that are never recognized, but they are. They're Buddhas.
Yes, many. And as I was alluding to a minute ago, there are many people that are awake and they don't even know what awake is.
I'll tell you, yes, I know, but this is a random thought, but I used to ride the train a lot in Japan, down the east coast of Japan to go to work, which is at my university, from where I lived in Kamakura. And I was very much in the working age and working mode of life. So I wanted to keep my mind busy at all times. And I would be even trying to sit on the ocean side of the train, so that the train car, so that I could see the ocean, because the ocean is pretty dull in Japan. It's the other side of the Pacific Ocean. You hardly ever see any surf. There was one little place where a tiny bit of surf came over one tiny rock, and that was about it. Otherwise, it was just waves. Unlike here in Mexico. But I would see, at the same time I was writing and I was keeping my mind as busy as I could possibly make it, I would see older Japanese women who would sit. They were perfectly coiffed, perfectly dressed, and they would sit there drinking a little little can of green tea, Japanese green tea, and they would sit there very peacefully on the ocean, on the opposite side. The mountainside was just a mountainside or some trees, not nearly as interesting to me as the ocean. And they didn't have anything to read. They didn't have a computer. They weren't flipping through TikTok or whatever it is on their phones. They weren't checking their mail. Mm-hmm. They were just sitting there. Now, it took me a while to figure out how calm and peaceful those minds were. Mm. I had to get older, and I really, now I have I was only mystified before. Now I have a sense that they were spiritually advanced. Yeah. True.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That's deep. That's a deeper, you saw it years later, and we often see things years later that reflect on something that was very pure. Jenny said at 1254, all these states are the result of different progressive path practices. Yeah. They have no particular relevance in the direct path other than Nirvikalpa Samadhi, which is helpful to point to the difference between mind and consciousness.
I couldn't agree more. That's why I said, actually all the ones you have to pay attention to are Nirvikalpa Samadhi and Sahaja Samadhi, which is the final state.
Yeah, thank you. And Rick said, actually, every experience, knowing itself is another name for consciousness. The witness arises simultaneously with the object witnessed. They are not separate, not two. The knower and the known are one.
Very nice, as always.
Yeah, thank you, Rick. And then here's another one from Rick. And then Jenny. And Rick said, we love flattery because we love all facets of ourselves. This is not a personal love because authentic love is not personal. Mm-hmm. Awesome. And then finally, Jenny says, this relates to the last paragraph of 324, in which he says you need a Karana guru for full realization. People can be awakened, but the main work of the Karana guru is in establishment. Yeah.
Good.
Thank you. Thank you for those comments. Awesome. And let's move to the last bit on 327, and we'll move to 328. Man alone of all living beings exists and knows he or she exists. And this is really good. Animals only know objects. The dream state is as continuous as the waking state. The deeply impressionable person alone has dreams. And this bit that says man alone of all living beings exists and knows he exists, it goes along with that verse in the Genesis that said God or consciousness determines, or consciousness has given man dominion over all things. It's really just talking about a statement of fact.
Okay.
In my mind, it's not really saying, oh, we have dominion, we're over the animals, we're over all the elements. It's really saying that man alone knows that he or she exists.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that, Rick. Thank you for that. I think back to Rick for a second, but Bill, I had more trouble with these 4 lines than I did with the rest of the text. I have a dog that wants me to know it exists. She exists. Whenever she's hungry, wants to go out.
Yeah.
She's very aware of her existence and her needs, and she wants me to be aware of her existence too.
Yes, yes. And we can connect with that existence because it's not separate from our own.
Precisely, yes.
Yeah, I love that transmittal, that love transmittal that doesn't need words.
Yeah, exactly. Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
Now, this next one, the dream state is as continuous as the waking state. Okay, which means it's discontinuous when you wake up, and the waking state is discontinuous when you dream. And both states are discontinuous when you're in deep sleep. Okay, what have we said? Just the obvious, right? Next one is the deeply impressionable person alone has dreams. Are we all deeply impressionable? Because is there anybody that doesn't have dreams?
I don't have a lot of dreams. I have some. There are some people that have them every day.
Well, there's dreaming and there's remembering dreams too. I mean, I can remember a dream as soon as I wake up, but it's within minutes I've forgotten it.
Right. Yeah. That would be all of us. I think all of us have it. Or my wife, she has dreams and she says, it was as real as this right here.
Yeah. That happens.
Yeah. So we have a few minutes. We have about 6 minutes left. Let's see if we can finish the next one. What are experiences during sadhana?
Sadhana.
Thank you. And how to interpret them?
This is the story I talked about before, where the man is tempted by his actual Ishta Devata again. His Krishna. He's so familiar with Krishna that Krishna appears to him and appears to him by his side. And to test him, he sends him across the river. And he realizes that he was wasting his time worshiping God in a temple when he could have been worshiping God right in front of him. This is the whole idea of, reality is hidden. What's the expression? Hidden in plain sight. That's it.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That's our true nature.
It's there. So it's a matter, we're talking about Sahaja Samadhi again. The Kashmiris have it nicely put. They say it's a matter, when you have that experience of it, it is a recognition of what's always been there. It's not a brand new discovery out of nothing. It's a recognition that's always been there beneath, veiled, if you wish, but it's always been there. And that's what you get to. You get a sense of that in Nirvikalpa Samadhi and moving beyond.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. There's a line in A Course in Miracles that says enlightenment is not a change, it's but the recognition of what you've been always.
Precisely, exactly the same.
Yeah. Same thing. And Jenny, going back to that statement of man alone of all living beings.
Oh, yeah, what you saying, yeah.
She says chimps have language and they fight each other. Oh, yes, they do. And they come after you.
They kill each other, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but Jenny, does that, so they have a language and they fight each other, but do they know their true nature? Can they know that?
How can we possibly know? How can we know even whether another person knows his or her true nature? We can't.
Right.
Okay. Well, we can know by how they investigate and what comes out of the investigation. Because
that's only one way. That's only one way of discovering one's true nature, isn't it?
Yes. Yes. And they
could know it by being it. They could know it by being it, by feeling love,
and never be able to express it.
I think they all have their own language. Almost any of the highly developed species have language of one sort or another. It can be through movement. Sometimes it can be through objects as well. They just and sounds. I mean, my cats have a language of sounds. They have a very complex language of sounds with which they communicate with me.
Right.
Sure.
So it's would you say this statement is just not founded?
There's no evidence. I would say there's no evidence for it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I agree with that, because you would think that, I mean, these animals, they're not we're really not any better, higher, or anything than they are. And why would they not know their true nature?
It's an anthropocentric view. The universe is huge. What other creatures could there be in it? Why could we possibly think man is so important?
Yeah, that's such an arrogant idea, right? Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I really appreciate your response on that, Jenny and Dan. Appreciate it. So, having said that, let's just, I think we have 1 minute left. We don't really have time to finish the discourse. We'll pick this back up next week with Rick, and everyone. Rick West is going to be our co-host next week, so don't miss out on
my
next
friend
week.
Rick, yes.
Yeah. So Dan, how would you want to close today's meeting? This was awesome, and thank you for your insights and your deep understanding of all these different traditions.
Let's just do the last one, 3:30, about higher reason, right? The mind is only a expanded form of the ego. That's only mind. Even in daily life, there's something in us which stubbornly refuses to accept blindly all that the mind brings in. This is a clear expression of the higher reason in all of us, I might say. This is what's called viveka in Sanskrit, Viveka, viveka.
Mm-hmm.
Ramana Maharshi said, viveka is the eye of the seeker. Without it, one cannot see the truth. Viveka is seeing. He says it's discrimination. It's not really discrimination. It's discernment. discrimination has a negative sense in English.
Yep. Yep.
It's discernment from the real from the unreal.
Yeah.
The first Shankara in the 8th century said, Viveka is the sword that cuts through the knot of ignorance. When Francis and I were talking about Sanskrit texts, he said we both said we liked the work that was ascribed to the first Shankara Acharya called Viveka Chudamani, which means the crest jewel of wisdom. Like you have the best jewel in the crown was always right there on the top of the crest, right? So Viveka is that crest jewel. It's this spiritual discrimination, being able to tell the true from the false. It does not necessarily has to do with induction or deduction. It could be just intuitive.
Yeah. And this is why when one comes to surrender, or we come to a stressful place in our life and we don't know what to do, it's because the mind that thought it was a person, that thought it was separate, is thinned out, and this higher reasoning can be connected to its true nature or as true nature, and the receptivity is available.
Oh yes, one last thought on how do you know who's enlightened. Ramana Maharshi was told his disciples said they had these feast days and they'd feed everybody with, people from the villages would bring all kinds of food and they give it out to people. They said, what about the beggars and people we don't really know, like they straggle in. He said, for heaven's sakes, you don't know how many of those are Jivan Muktas. They might be freed in life.
Yeah.
You just don't know.
You just don't know. Yeah. Well, this has been enlightening, and thank you, Dan, and everyone else. Appreciate you continuing on this book study while I was filming, and thank you everyone for being part of this community. And we'll see you next week to carry on with Rick.